Yatit is a graduate of the University of Florida, where he majored in environmental engineering. And although he lacks a formal education in computer science, he self-taught his way into Silicon Valley, where he now works professionally as a developer. And Yatit, thank you for your time today. The first question I have for you is, what do you do? What is your employment? What languages do you work with?
Yeah, hi Ben. Good to be here. So I'm a software engineer specialized in user interfaces. I currently work at a company called Juniper Networks. I used to be a contractor at a large technology company here in the Bay Area, and that was sort of you know currently I work with JavaScript and Python. So for Python, I usually just do it for scripting and occasionally tutoring. But JavaScript is what I use day to day with frameworks and technologies like React JS and Angular and libraries like that.
How has the lack of a formal education in computer science affected your career?
Yeah, it's I think of it as both a blessing and a curse. Um, the curse part naturally comes from having to sort of um, study more and work more to be able to internalize the same concepts that I would have received maybe in a university setting. Um, Although the blessing I would say is that it sort of gives me a different perspective. I think um, when you talk to a lot of, just as an example, when you talk to a lot of computer science graduates and people who like Java or took Java in college, and that was sort of their first language, which is sort of the more traditional computer science path. For me, Visual Basic was my first language, and then I went into JavaScript. Oftentimes, people who studied computer science formally don't like JavaScript because it's feels too weird to them or something like that. So I would say that was sort of the blessing, is that I saw the power of JavaScript in creating user interfaces for software that people use, and I thought, wow, this is really awesome, and I want to work with this.
What are some common pitfalls that you've encountered that are like people who don't come from a CS background or just novices to the field of software engineering typically fall into?
Yeah, pitfalls. I would say there's quite a few, but I would say the most common one is sort of um, it's sort of just expecting, I guess, that it'll be easy. I don't know. I think that's sort of a big one because um, oftentimes the most common mistake that I've heard of. I mean, it didn't happen with me specifically in the sense of persistence, because I've heard some people start to learn computer science or pick up JavaScript or Python and things like that, and it's definitely difficult, and you get a lot of strange errors or bugs and things like that kind of make you often even rewrite things from scratch. And I think that's sort of uh, that sort of persistence, I think, is probably the most common mistake that I've seen from just starting out learning computer science. Like we're talking year one. The second thing I would say is that just focusing too much on the wrong tooling, or the just not making the right design decisions from the beginning, and not making the right technology decisions from the beginning. And I think with things like that, it really helps to have a goal in mind. um, when you have a goal of what you actually want to build, or what you want to learn, or what you want to like the problem that you want to help solve, building the technology for it becomes 10 times easier, really.
Yeah.
When you don't have, and I think that's one of the reasons. And um, one of the things that I I really liked when working with you, Ben, is that you knew exactly what you wanted to accomplish, and I think as a result of that, I think you definitely did accomplish it something like 5 to 10 times faster than somebody else in your shoes would have if they didn't have that kind of a concrete goal of exactly what you wanted to accomplish.
That I'm sure we've both participated in hackathons, as may very well many of the listeners listening right now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this phenomenon in hackathons, but I'm sure it exists in all firms,
Mm-hmm.
of scope creep, where
Mm-hmm.
you think of more and more features that you want to add to your project, and
Mm-hmm.
it just gets so insanely complex. So I entirely agree on the importance of, like, at step one, establishing what exactly the app has to do, and then like working from that blueprint.
Right.
I can speak personally that one of the most common mistakes that I made when I was beginning to learn how to code is that I had figured out how to code, so I wanted to do it immediately, when
Mm-hmm.
in reality, the proper process is to like map out what exactly the user wants to use the app for, what the app needs to do, create mock-ups of how it should look, and then the last step is to actually code it, because the coding takes so long. It's so difficult to change.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for sharing that. The entire like learning curve to development can be so steep.
Mm-hmm.
And you touched on persistence, which really is huge, because there's some saying that persistence plus talent equals skill, and then persistence and skill equals achievement.
Nice.
And like I'm curious what it was like for you to overcome that steep learning curve, and any methods you may have found that helped you overcome it quicker. And what did it feel like? What were indicators that you were beginning to get over the peak?
Yeah, in terms of, I like to think that, I didn't really become, I would say, like a good developer until probably sometime last year. Um, and the part of that has to do with, um, you know, my not having a formal background. Part of that has to do with, just the front end world has changed a lot in the time that I started learning, and the point where we're at now. So, I started out with core JavaScript and get element by ID type of things, where you actually query the HTML directly, and that was sort of my first significant project working with user interfaces. And now you tell someone you use that syntax, and they're like, "Why? Are you crazy or something?" Right? So and that's just 5 years ago, right? 5 years ago, that was completely acceptable to write your apps that way. I think a big shift that's occurred that made learning for somebody like me more difficult than maybe learning for somebody now is that mobile sort of changed everything. Before, you would just create one screen size and expect your apps and websites and everything to work for that one screen size in a browser that's probably Chrome and Internet Explorer. So things are fairly predictable, except for Internet Explorer. That wasn't predictable, but that's sort of an aside. Now you have mobile devices, you have the cloud, you have all of these different devices and different ways to communicate with those devices, that makes creating front-end applications not only a little bit more involved, but also think of that transition that occurred in those 5 years. Everything that somebody learned 5 years ago, they'd have to relearn or learn in a different way. So that's kind of a big reason why the frameworks today that I think are finally mature, right? It's like that big change has finally happened. So I like to think that now is the best time to learn user interface development and be a developer. And just, getting over that learning curve, you just sort of learn to learn, I guess. Like you just constantly learn new things from Stack Overflow or articles and other things that might be, coming down the pipeline.
Yatit, I'm curious, what is your story? And I mean this to say, how did you get from the University of Florida to employment in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, it started, with an engineering class I took, or a programming class I took when pursuing my engineering degree, which was around 2000 and 11, 2012 or so. Um, and it was really just a class in Excel enhanced with macros that you can add to write programs using Visual Basic within Excel. But I thought it was really cool because you could do a lot of interesting things like color code every third cell, in the same way, and have really interesting everything you can do with programming language inside of Excel. So I thought that was really interesting, and saw how programming could be applicable to real engineering problems. So that was pretty eye opening for me. And then later on, I did research using my Excel skills to help a graduate student that was doing a PhD at the time in collaboration with NASA. So I did that for a summer and part of fall, and that was when I really got to solve real engineering problems with programming, and I thought it was really interesting. So after that, I learned Python, I learned JavaScript. I went into and collaborated with a few friends to work on a technology company for a while, that we started. And then after that, that was, as part of that was when I moved to Silicon Valley. And I'm really, I was just really interested in creating user interfaces and products that people liked to use. And after that, I went and contracted for a professional consulting company where I was employed for about 18 months. And then just recently, as recently as last week was when I found this position where I'm now a UI developer at a division that was recently acquired as part of an acquisition.
You touched on doing the Excel and VS Code, not VS Code, the Visual Studio Basic for a
I wish I
professor.
had VS Code.
And like we spoke earlier about how much more effective a developer can be, especially one who's attempting to build their portfolio and gain experience, when they have a clearly defined goal that they're trying to achieve for the project. And doing work for professors, or like finding ways in one's community to get real life development projects are great, because you go online and make up apps like, this is for a baking company to help them calculate how much cakes cost.
Right.
But compare that to like, oh yeah, this is from my university's College of Medicine because a professor was doing research on peripheral arterial disease and needed a app to track patient data.
Right.
Compare those two on the resume.
Right.
So I really like how you touched on that. And I feel like that goes into a conversation about work experience versus education, like formal education. And I understand that like those two factors are like very comparable when it comes to both interviewing for a job and then actual success in the job. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. I would say both work experience and education play a big role at the beginning for sure. Um, as you progress, I would say about the 5 year mark, um, the work experience ends up playing a much bigger role. Although, it's always great to have a tier one school on your resume. Naturally, that's always there, right? Or top 100 or top 200 even. But uh, ultimately, once you find your groove in sort of the specialty that you wanna pursue in programming, even after 2 years of experience, your employers will look at what your most recent job was. That ends up playing a much bigger role, and how you performed at that job too. So um, at about the 5 year mark is usually when you're kind of uh, have either had the opportunity to be promoted at your first company and you have at least two different roles listed on there, or you've worked at two, maybe even three companies, by then, and have that sort of track record of applications that you've built in your portfolio and your GitHub profile and all of those things, that ends up playing a much bigger role than your education.
You're describing the difference between having projects like what we talked about a moment ago and like actual industry experience developing.
Well, I think in many ways, yes, and in other ways, they're kind of one and the same, because when you have projects like that you create on GitHub and have them published for real problems that you've solved at a university, that is sort of like, that's sort of the foundation of your skill set, right? And that's going to show up on GitHub, and your activity will show up on there, and other things that you've published will also be on there. So ultimately, it's sort of that portfolio that you continue to make, which could start as early as even before college. That will end up taking a much greater role, and have more of an emphasis on what kinds of opportunities you'll have the chance to be at.
That almost seems like a roadmap that you've laid out to like developing a development skill set to first learn fundamentals and then find ways in one's community to apply those fundamentals in a real life application, and then leverage those small projects into employment, and leverage the employment into better employment, and then work your way up.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't think of it as a roadmap like that, but I would say, yeah, that's a pretty good overview and summary of how to sort of continue forward in a programming career. One sort of caution I would like to present with development and picking employment is that you don't have to work at the biggest company or the coolest company or the one with the best perks or what have you. I think if you're good, there are a lot of opportunities to pick something that interests you. That whether it be an industry like health or medicine, whether it be an industry like networking that I'm in now, Wi-Fi, or education, or any other industry that you find interesting. I think you have the potential to work for teams like that. So just think of career progress as more of a, I've heard this somewhere, I can't remember where before, but somebody wrote about it, so it's not an original idea, but think about it as more of a canvas that you paint that represents some ideal scenario that you'd like to pursue based on your values or what have you, rather than a sort of ladder that you have to climb up. And I think that would sort of make you happier as a developer, and also give you more time to polish your skill sets in a particular domain, which will itself, indirectly let you go up the career ladder anyways.
I like that a lot. Those are all the questions that I had for you. Yatit, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, sure thing, Ben.
That was Yatit Thakker, and links to his online presence will be available below the video in the description. If there was any question that you would have liked answered but that we did not get to, I invite you to leave it as a comment below, and I'll see if I can get it answered for you. Otherwise, I hope you found this interesting or helpful or something. Let me know what you thought, and have a good rest of your day.